Well, I hope you all had a good Christmas and a happy New Year, and the new year is off to a good beginning for you. Please turn with me to Psalm 127. We're going to pick up on our journey through the songs of ascent. As the Jews would migrate to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast, they literally traveled up the mountain to go into God's presence. So our life is like an upward journey to Him as well. Psalm 127, I'll start with verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go to bed and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for He gives His beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. I want to share with you about work today. Work is a major component of our lives. It's unavoidable. And work can be good or it can be bad. Work can be create an opportunity to sin, but it can also be a place where our faith will deepen and mature. It can also be a challenge to establish a proper place for work in our lives and to maintain that place. There are two currents of thought that seem to dominate our landscape. One springs from the Eastern culture, which says, do as little as possible. This was a problem with the church in Thessalonica. They believed that Jesus was coming back at any moment, and so many in the church just stopped working. They thought, no, that's secular, that's earthly, we're going to be spiritual, and we're going to concentrate on Jesus coming back. And they were happy to live by faith off the generosity and charity of the less spiritual members of the congregation. Many politicians are trying to use this as a remedy for companies that are going out of business due to our response to the pandemic. Let's just pay people not to work. It sounds like charity, but this is an insidious evil. One, it will bankrupt the nation. But two, it makes the recipients of such charity dependent and subservient to the state. But worst of all, it robs people of the nobility and the dignity that honest work provides. The other stream of thought springs from Western culture. Try to do more than you can. And there is a thought where we tend to deify human effort. The machine is our symbol and technology is our God. And buildings and machines and processes are more important than people. And unfortunately, the church is not exempt from this. There are too many pastors, too many denominational leaders who fret and stew over demographics and market share and using those secular terms. There are many places where we have an adversarial relationship between employers and employees, where companies value people only by what they can produce, and employees value their employers only for what they can provide. This is not healthy. I have a colleague in my business. He was getting ready to transfer some people out of his practice, and he referred to that as taking out the trash. That's horrible. That's horrible. We are to value people for who they are, not by what they have or not have, what they can do or don't do. We have a tendency to value and reward the workaholic, and in doing so, we find people who reap a harvest of empty lives, broken families, and shoddy workmanship. There has to be a better way. And thank God I believe that there is, and Psalm 127 points this out. Two things I wish to share with you this morning. And the first of these is work's value. Work's value. The underlying premise of this psalm is that work was established by God because He is a God who works. Look at verse 1. That word unless, it presupposes that God does build, that God does protect. How does the Bible begin? In the beginning, God sat majestically upon His throne. In the beginning, God radiated love and beauty throughout the heavens? No. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He made something. He did something. Genesis 1 is a journal of work. And while He rested at the end of creation week, He did not retire. He is an active God. He is a God of work. He is a God who remains involved with His creation. The word work, in its various forms and usages, appears 778 times in Scripture. John, in his gospel, recorded these words that Jesus spoke. My food is to do the will of Him who sent me and to accomplish His work. My Father is working up to this very moment, and I am working. We must work the works of Him who sent me. We live in a universe where God is at work. And when we read Paul's letters, what we can draw from that is that our work is a normal outflowing extension of the activity of God in His world. Now we know in Genesis 3 that God cursed Adam and his labor, but the curse found in Genesis 3 was not in work per se, not in work itself actually, but work that is senseless, work that is futile or vain. In other words, work that is disconnected from God, work that ignores the unless of this psalm. When our work is disconnected from God, we tend to drift to extremes. We tend to become frantic or anxious or compulsive, or we tend to become lethargic, lazy, and indifferent. God didn't just create Adam. He gave Adam something to do. The truth is that work is good. The Scriptures tell us whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. I don't care if you run a CEO of a company, or dig ditches, or flip burgers at McDonald's. Whatever it is that you do, work has dignity, it has purpose. And we find fulfillment when our work is an outflow of our relationship with God, whatever we may be doing. The second thing that I would share with you this morning is work's blessing. Let's go back and look at verse 1. Building the house. That phrase can mean either you're literally constructing a physical house, or you are forming and growing a family. Guarding a city has to do with protection. Now let's think about these for a moment. What do we do to get sons and daughters? Actually, very little. We participate in an act of love that was provided for us in the context of creation, but then the miraculous process of reproduction is set into motion. It's a process which God has created and over which we have no control. In the other analogy, we can set a guard on a tower, and that guard can give us warning, but that guard cannot keep the onset of nightfall, nor can that guard stop an encroaching enemy. The value of our work, who we are as people, and the result is not shaped by our achievements, the rewards that we have, the titles behind our names, or even the stuff that we accumulate. The value of our work ultimately is shaped by the relationships that we develop with others, beginning with our relationship with God. And I say that because people won't remember so much what we do or say as they will remember how we made them feel. Gene Peterson wrote in one of his books, and I believe this is true, and I quote this, "For it makes very little difference how much money Christians carry in their wallets and purses. It makes very little difference how our culture values and rewards our work if God doesn't." And on this path we travel, there's ultimately very little that we can control. There's a new advisor that I'm helping to mentor and get started in their career. They come in at 6 o'clock in the morning. They leave about 6 o'clock at night. They're in every Saturday, stressing out over their production goals. They had a big case that didn't work out, and they were falling apart. And I said, I know you have to hit these numbers, but you can only do what you can do. You can't make people decide to work with you. You can't make people just make their own decisions. The only thing that you can control is your activity, and you just do that. It's really true for all of us. Ultimately, there's very little that we can control. I've got a heart condition. There are 3 electric wires that go from the upper to lower chamber. 2 of those are blocked. There's nothing that can be done to unblock that. Someday I'm going to need a pacemaker. You know, if that third one decides to get blocked, there's nothing medical science can do for me. If my central nervous system shuts down, no amount of medical treatment is going to make my lungs breathe, or my heart beat, or the synapses in my brain fire. There's ultimately very little that we can control in our lives. Compulsive work habits, workaholism, which society values and rewards, I would suggest that it's a sign of a weak faith that cries out that God cannot be trusted. These 2 analogies in verse 1 tell us because God does build the house, because God does guard the city, you and I are blessed. We are blessed. And when He is the center of our lives, and by extension, the center of our work, you and I are blessed with a measure of wealth. It may be a significant measure. It may be very modest, but yet we are blessed with that measure. But not only that, when He is the center of it all, we are blessed with joy, with love, with purpose, fulfillment. We're blessed with security, and we're blessed with protection. And we are blessed with all of the things that make our lives complete. And when He is in the center of our lives, we don't become workaholics. And when we see our best efforts crumble, we don't give in to despair. What you and I do is we honor Him with our best efforts, and then we rest. We rest. And we trust Him to continue to do His work in our lives. Jesus said, but seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. What things? All the things that we need. All the things that give life meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. If you haven't already, make the surrender of your life, the surrender of your work. Seek Him first above all. He will build your house. He will guard your city. He will provide for all of your needs. And you will find yourself healthy physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because you and I will be living and working from God's perspective. Give your best effort and then rest in Him and trust Him to meet that need in your lives. Let's stand together, and Flo, if you would come to the piano. Let's turn to the back of the hymn book. The songs that had been picked out today, they just kind of spoke to me, and this just popped in my mind, and I'd like for us to end with this. And of course, the altar is open if you'd like to come and pray, but let's sing after all.